I'm constantly doing things with my family, but I'm not really reflecting upon how my actions are impacting my children.
Okay, where do I fall? Who am I as a parent? And there's a tendency to say, okay, do I fit in this box? So am I authoritarian, and that means everything I do is authoritarian? Or am I permissive? Everything I do is permissive.
You don't know what connection looks like because it wasn't given to you. So you
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear parents, moms and dads, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Tarbiyah Project Podcast. We're very excited, once again, myself and Sarah, to be here and continue our discussion from where we kind of left off last episode. So make sure you go check that out whenever you have a chance. And so let's welcome one more time my co-host, Sarah Qureshi, my wife and co-founder of the Tarbiyah Project. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How are you doing today?
I am tired.
Yes, and that's part of I think the raw tarbiyah that goes on in the back end. Of course, these are busy days with the kids and the routines, but alhamdulillah, we had a chance to sit down and continue our discussion.
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. I think we had an amazing discussion last time. Just to kind of recap, we left out and talked a lot about intentional parenting. And so we had kind of zigzagged through different topics and stories, but I think what the idea was to uncover the divide between reactionary versus proactive, or you can call it unintentional, subconscious versus intentional parenting, and what that kind of looks like. And so maybe if you want to give a quick recap on that, and then really where we want to spend our time today is where to, once you want to become more intentional and you're becoming more aware of your parenting style, who am I as a father and a mother? So we'll spend the bulk of our time there. But why don't you, Sarah, walk us through the difference between intentional and a little bit of unintentional, and how can one tell if they are truly an intentional parent?
Yeah. So I think just keeping it brief, we did cover it last time. So just keeping it brief, I think the main thing is that when you become a parent, and every Muslim parent, their desire is to raise their children upon Qur'an and Sunnah, and have Islam instilled in their children's lives. The basic question you want to ask yourself is, how much am I thinking about parenting? And I think that will answer that question for you. So if parenting is on top of your concerns, not in terms of what my child is doing, but parenting in terms of what am I doing, how proactive am I, how much am I learning, how much am I growing, if it is like the top 3 things in your life right now, then you're an intentional parent. You might, and again, it's not about perfection. It's not about how amazing you're doing or how far along you are. It's just about how intentional you are.
Okay.
But if you can truly reflect and be truly honest with yourself, and you say, you know what, I am around my children a lot. I'm constantly doing things with my family, but I'm not really reflecting upon how my actions are impacting my children. I'm not really taking, and I mean, literally, as the word says, intentional. You're literally sitting down, reflecting. Either it could be journaling, like sitting down and journaling, or talking to your spouse about it, or having these genuine conversations about, I did this and I wasn't sure if it was the right. If you're not doing that, then you're probably parenting, just as things come along. As your child gets older and you're like, okay, my 4-year-old is doing now this, so what do I do now? And as you just and slowly your child will grow up, and you would have just not really intentionally looked into your parenting. You would have just dealt with situations and moments.
Absolutely. 100%.
And I think that's the big difference. If someone wants to assess themselves, they can do it that way.
One of the things with intentional parenting we also mentioned last time was going back to any other ibadah, right? So if parenting is looked at as ibadah, which it absolutely is from a Quranic and Sunnah perspective, that's the Islamic paradigm, then imagine, swap that out for any other ibadah, like our salah, or, for example, eating, or any other mundane acts of life when you don't have the intention or the sincere intentionality of that ibadah, إنما الأعمال بالنيات, right? So the actions are judged by intention. And so parenting in that sense is no different. If you're intentional, you're thinking about parenting and you're taking the steps with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in mind, automatically that intentionality comes just like any other ibadah. Or it could be very ritualistic, which unfortunately a lot of us are trapped in that as well. So maybe let's move forward a little bit, which is, okay, here I am, I'm a parent, I've perhaps listened to the Tarbiyah Project podcast, or I've read, or a friend talked to me, something happened in my life where I've realized, okay, you know what, I need to be more intentional with my parenting. And now this new door has opened up, and I have no idea what lays behind this door. And unfortunately, you don't have lights flipped on and you can see everything. Unfortunately, you're maybe carrying a candle, and you're trying to figure out step by step, okay, where to from here. So perhaps that means parenting style. Where am I today?
Yeah.
What other styles are out there?
Yeah.
Right? And then how do I go from perhaps a style that's not ideal to a style that is ideal, and maybe even rooted in the Qur'an and Sunnah, which we'll perhaps get to. So talk to us. I'm standing at the door of intentionality. I've opened it. Where do I go now?
Okay, so if we're doing a broad overview of parenting styles,
Yes.
I think, again, you have to, and you're already a parent, and you're already, you've already intended to be more conscious, more intentional with your parenting. The question you should ask yourself is, how do I respond to my child most of the time?
Okay.
We do not talk in absolutes in this world of parenting, because there is none. All of our lives are busy. There's a lot of variables. There's a lot of factors involved. And so we're not saying 100% of the time, but we're saying, how are you responding to your child, your children, 70% most of the time, even 60%, even 50. If 55% you're doing something, one thing, and the other side is, then that becomes your predominant way of parenting.
Okay.
And everyone has a parenting style.
Okay.
So you have to ask yourself a question, is like, how am I responding to my child? Am I responding when my child comes, or if I'm around my children, am I usually giving them a lot of, like, trying to just discipline them, like constantly trying to teach them, constantly trying to, just expect them to follow rules? Is the majority of my conversation and time spent with my children around, do this, don't do this, this is not how you're supposed to be doing things? Like, it's a lot of, and then expecting them to follow through immediately, regardless of what age your child is at. Then you would probably, I'm not going to go into the technical terms right now, but that would, if I had to broadly put 4 parenting styles, I would say there's harsh parenting, there is gentle parenting, then there is permissive, just, like loose, permissive parenting, and then, hopefully none of us are in that, but there is the neglectful parenting. If you are someone who's always expecting them to follow rules, and that's the predominant time you're spending with your child, I will fall under harsh parenting. And that is pretty much we would say it's traditional parenting, borrowed from generation upon generation upon generation. The gentle parenting paradigm is where, so this is where I do want to give a clarification. Gentle parenting started out, the term was somewhere in the 2010s. It became more like, terminology with the social media. And the term itself and the parenting style initially was wonderful. It started off with this concept of, you give gentleness, but also discipline, and also firm boundaries, but you also understand and lead with empathy with your children, and lead with connection. That's the underlying foundation of gentle parenting, although it has changed significantly in terms of what it's portrayed as, especially on social media. So different people I think it's just been watered down a lot. So I'm going to come back to gentle parenting later. So we've got harsh parenting, gentle parenting. Then we have permissive. So where there's a lot of love, there's a lot of understanding, empathy, there's a lot of care for your children. There's a lot of fun going around, but there's no boundaries, or there's little boundaries.
Okay.
And the parent is actually struggling to maintain boundaries.
Yeah.
So it's like you've kind of gone a little bit too extreme in the
Yeah.
gentle parenting.
One or two plugs there, right? So just for the benefit of our those who are watching, and alhamdulillah, you've done quite a bit of study, research, and we still do that from a learning as students of parenting as well. But so these styles that you're talking about are rooted in research, and that has come before us. And perhaps the parent, this is my educated guess, but you please confirm, which is the traditional model. When we say tradition, it's what that conjures up is harshness, kind of a very disciplinary way, authoritarian perhaps is the word. And then now you have this massive societal shift or gravitation towards the other side of the spectrum, which is permissive.
Yeah.
So would you agree that in some ways, societally or socially, on the broader level, it's a reaction to what's happened for decades?
Yes.
And these kids have grown up in very disciplinarian homes, and they've perhaps said, "I never again." And now what they're doing is, when we parent, we're not going to do any of that. And so there's a reaction to it, which is permissive.
Yes.
And neither one is Islamically appropriate.
Right.
And again, the middle path is what our ummah is commanded to take, right? So maybe just talk about that spectrum and how we've changed over time.
So I mean, I think like we can go back into someone, a father or a mother, a parent who's just a Muslim parent who's just become a parent, right?
Yeah.
We all remember that feeling of holding that newborn baby for the first time and just being in awe, but also feeling completely lost. Like, how am I supposed to do this?
Right.
And I think as much as we a lot of us don't start thinking about parenting until our children are at that age where they're responding back in a way that we don't know how to react to. So when they're around toddler age, 2 to 3 years of age, and the child develops so quickly at that time that by the time we learn about one thing, if you are intentionally parenting, the child has already moved on to a different behavior.
Yeah.
And so it's a lot. We understand that it's a lot for parents who are busy and overwhelmed. And then you borrow from what you've already seen. So because you're busy, you don't have a lot of time, you borrow from what has already been, what maybe the way you were parented. And there's either two options. You either follow the way you were parented and you start just adopting it completely with a few changes here and there, or you decide very intentionally that I will never do what my parents did to me. And so in an effort to do that, you don't usually go halfway. You go completely opposite.
Yeah.
And it happens the flip as well. Like, so a child may have grown up with really harsh parenting. Like their parents were very harsh. So they decided to be a lot more gentler with their children. But in reality, what happened over, years and years, like things are busy, you have another child, you have 3 or 4 in the mix, and you don't realize that when you look back, you have a really hard time putting in boundaries for your children. So you've become a permissive parent, even though that was not your intention in the beginning. You just wanted to be gentler. Yeah. And the opposite also happens is when you grew up really in a permissive household where there was a lot of love but very little rules. And as children need rules and boundaries as well. They need our parents to act like parents and to tell them with a lot of empathy. So when you grow up with a lot of that, you may have found yourself as an adult struggling with discipline or procrastination or, just being more driven and ambitious, and you want those things to be there for you. And so because you struggle with that, you don't want your child struggling with those things. So you adopt these really harsh, routine-based schedules in your household. And again, in the beginning, you just wanted it to be like a little structured, but then you don't realize after years and years of years that it just became really too harsh and you just completely veered off from your original initial philosophy. There is that aspect of generational
Got it. So when it comes to these different parenting styles, and you'll talk about where they come from and those kinds of things, but it sounds like there is none of this exists in as mutually exclusive states, because for first timers or for those who are beginning our contemplation on, okay, where do I fall? Who am I as a parent? And there's a tendency to say, okay, do I fit in this box? So am I authoritarian, and that means everything I do is authoritarian? Or am I permissive? Everything I do is permissive. And then as you mature and you learn more, you may find, you know what, 60-70% of the time I'm this, but 30% of the time I'm this. So is it 1 + 1 = 2? How does this all work? So if I'm starting out on that journey, trying to figure out who I am, how do I figure out these combinations? And then does that allow me to figure out my parenting style?
Yeah. If we go back to research, there is research around parenting styles by a researcher called Baumrind.
Okay.
And we look into, when we learn about child psychology and parenting, we look at Baumrind's parenting styles. And when she did her research, there were 3 primary parenting styles that came up, which were authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. And that's widely accepted, widely used by therapists, coaches, researchers, and universities teach Baumrind's parenting styles as well. So when Baumrind did her research study, she looked into how children, preschoolers, were responding to their parents, and they actually did a longitudinal study to see how those same parents, how those same children were doing later on in terms of other aspects of their life. So what they found was, firstly, how does that parenting style affect the child, but also it allowed them to categorize different parenting styles. So there's 3 main that she came up with, which was authoritarian, authoritative, and permissive. And the research was expanded later on to add neglectful or abusive parenting style. So with that, going back to what we were talking earlier, if we talk about authoritarian, it's the parenting style that would come under harsh parenting style, which is, you are expecting a lot of rules to be followed. You're expecting a lot of, you don't want any conversation or there's not a lot of leeway of discussion. It's a lot of one-way kind of parenting, and that's majority of the time you're doing that. Authoritative is where you expect rules, you have firm boundaries, but it's led with empathy. There's also a lot of connection. It's built upon connection with the child. And then permissive is where there's a lot of love, a lot of there's a lot of fun, there's a lot of love, there's a lot of understanding, but there's very little rules and boundaries.
I think it's an important point to tease out, and inshallah you can expand on it. Are we saying that permissive parents love their kids, authoritarian do not?
All parents love their kids.
Okay.
No, let me clarify. All parents love their kids the only way they know how to love.
Okay.
Okay.
That's important.
So if we know it's very natural for the child to expect love from their parents, it's also natural for the parents to love their child. However, I think we have deeply misunderstood what love looks like from an Islamic perspective.
Okay. You did a wonderful job at the workshop that we did in person, where we went through these styles, you went through these styles, and ultimately we landed from a Sunnah perspective, what that aligns to best. So inshallah you could talk about that. But maybe bringing in the word affection, right? Because exactly like you said, the foundation of all these parenting styles, if you ask the parent, it is love. No parent in their right mind would say, I don't love my kids. That's hardwired in us. But the way you are going about your actions as a parent out of that so-called love is what determines your connection with your child. And so affection, that is extremely, extremely important in any of these parenting styles. So perhaps that's where you need to dial up and down depending on, finding that middle ground. But if you can talk about maybe just finish the thought around the four parenting styles, but then come back to what does the Qur'an and Sunnah teach us about these four?
Yeah. So the last one is just neglectful or abusive.
Okay.
Abusive, I'm not going to cover
Okay.
right now, but neglectful, I think, is important to mention here because a lot of us, we may think that we're not neglectful. A lot of us may think that our parents were not neglectful. And they may have been either physically just neglecting your needs in terms of not being providing or not, giving you what you need. But a lot of the neglect comes from emotional neglect. So either I want to bring in the factors that impact that. In our culture, there's a lot of emphasis on joint family systems.
Okay.
And that impacts how present parents can be for their children. So you may be around your children, you may be serving them in other ways, you may be serving the rest of the family, but if your child is not getting that one-on-one connection time with you, if your child is not getting just a lot of time with you, alone, then that impacts that relationship. That's one factor. It could be one factor. I'm not saying all joint family systems are. I'm not making a judgment on that. I'm just saying it just does impact. Also, if you may be just present, but you don't know what connection looks like because it wasn't given to you. So you have a really hard time. Like, I have a lot of moms coming to me saying, I don't like playing with my children. Like, I have a hard time playing with my children. Because either it feels really hard or it feels useless, like you're not doing anything, because their relationship with play was heavy. They were not, it just felt like they were either scolded a lot of the times or every time they came back from play, it was just not a good memory. So they don't remember, positivity coming from that.
Okay. Can I ask you a devil's advocate question then?
Yes.
There's parents out there who will say, well, every child is different. So I have 3 kids, 4 kids. They're all very different to each other. One loves to talk and sit and be very chatty. The other one doesn't want anything else except being locked in their room all day. And that makes them perfectly happy. So is it then fair that I am authoritarian with one child and permissive with another, and maybe authoritative with... So, I can... If there's multiple of these styles, well, my children are different too. So why can't I adopt different styles with different kids?
Yeah. Firstly, I don't think it works that way just in terms of practice. Okay. I think it's the parenting style is of the parent.
Okay.
And so you have to firstly be intentional about what parenting style you are adopting. And if you have a certain parenting style, you're tending towards one, but you would like to change that, you can always work on changing that. But it will take work and effort on your part to undo and to learn something new, like anything that we're doing. But I think going back to different children, so I think, yes, different children need different things from us, but our approach, the basic principles don't change, right? Like the manifestation of that might change. So if you are leading with empathy and one child requires a lot of hugging and touching and they just require a lot of like affection, that child requires that. And so as a parent who is authoritative is saying, well, because I understand that my child needs that, I will try to give that to them as much as possible. And again, maintaining boundaries, because sometimes we may not be able to give it to them, but we do it as much as possible for that child. The other child doesn't like to be touched and, they like to be left alone. That's how they process their feelings. Now, if you are saying, you know what, I like this for myself, so I'm going to hug and that child is getting the way that they are being designed, the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has designed them, they need some alone time. The empathy part of you would be to understand that your child doesn't need that in that moment. So by you backing off is actually still practicing empathy. So the principle doesn't change. It's just what it looks like might change.
A lot of people may get confused between authoritarian and authoritative. They're sometimes even used as synonyms. Wrongly, I'm not saying correctly, they're wrongly used as synonyms because a lot of people don't differentiate between the two. And they both have the word authority in it. So maybe just can we tease that out?
Yes.
What separates authoritative? I think the others are easier to understand because okay, permissive, yeah, we get it. There's like no boundaries, and everything is affection. Everything is quote unquote love, which would have established every parent loves their kid. But these two are a little tricky because hey, you need discipline. We know that really well. But what is the blurred line going from authoritarian? Yes, there's discipline, but now you become authoritative, which I want to come to the example of the Prophet ﷺ, and that style being most aligned to the seerah, which we know. So tease us out between authoritarian and authoritative.
I can understand why it's confusing, but they are very different. Authoritarian is someone where they again expect rules, they expect their children to listen to them. There's a lot of conversation around constantly trying to teach and constantly trying to discipline, and it's constant. I think that's the main differentiator, right? Like it's just even when you're setting rules, there's no I don't want to hear ifs or buts. There's no discussion. So I think maybe an example would be helpful. And then authoritative is, again, you are setting the same rules, but it's coming from empathy. So if I can give an example of that, I know screen time is a big issue. This was the same example we gave in the workshop. If screen time is a major issue, say you have a 10-year-old child, and you have agreed that 30 minutes a day is what the child is allowed on a school night to do after they, finish their homework and whatnot. Now, an authoritative parent, say the child is on the screen time, they're either watching TV or iPad, and it's the 30 minutes is up, and the authoritarian parent either starts yelling right from the top, I need you to stop right now, maybe snatches the TV remote out of their hands because they are now enforcing the rules. And they're doing it under that banner. They're not doing it because they think that they're being harsh. They think that they're just allowing the child to follow through the rules. Like, it's my house, so my rules kind of thing. And when the child cries, they actually have zero empathy for that because they feel like the child has already crossed a boundary, and so the child doesn't deserve any empathy.
But it's out of love, right? Because it's out of love that this is the best for the child. If they continue...
It's out of love... So we can come back to this, but I think it's out of love based on their definition of love. And I think when we talk about these words, it's really important to define each word. What does love mean? What does empathy mean? A lot of us use these words because they're common now, but we don't actually understand what that means. So if we talk about love, if this parent is... You're right. They genuinely think this is the best thing for their child.
Correct.
And so they're enforcing it because it will be the best thing for them as they grow older. Because I'm teaching that this is how the real world works. You have to follow rules. I see this a lot in moms and parents where they struggle with their children not keeping their room clean, right? And it's like, well, I need to teach them. It might be like a 6-year-old or a 7-year-old. And it's like, well, I need to, or even a little bit older, like 12 or 13-year-old. I need to teach them to keep their room clean because they need to learn that as adults. And I think the idea here is, firstly, that's maybe how their parents responded to them. Like, rules had to be followed. And so that the only way of understanding love for this parent is the way that they were loved. And what we say in the world of healing and therapy and coaching is, you cannot give what you do not have.
Correct.
So if you didn't receive love in its purest form, which should be unconditional, which should not be performance-based, which should be, it should feel like someone is taking care of you. If that's not the form of love that you received, then that's not the truest form of love. And our definition of love only comes from what Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, showed us love to be.
Can you, because you're teasing out authoritarian, can you just paint a picture? You said 6-7-year-old, perhaps that was your example. Fast forward 20 years from there. What is the product of authoritarian parenting?
I think the biggest thing is that when you are told what to do, that child never learns how to make decisions for themselves.
Yep.
That child always second guesses their own decisions, because unless someone is telling me what to do, unless I am being asked to follow a certain path, how can I decide for myself, you know? They have a hard time saying no, because people pleasing comes from parent pleasing. I think that's the big thing. People pleasing, a lot of people say, oh, I'm a people pleaser. People pleasing started off with parent pleasing. When you were pleasing your parents constantly, then as a young child, then that became, and that translated into all your relationships. So if you have a hard time saying no to your boss, you know, and they've given you an unreasonable amount of tasks, and now you're working extra hard, and your family life is getting impacted, because you're working overtime with, on the weekends, just because you couldn't say no.
SubhanAllah. I think the one way I can just reflect on what you're saying, both styles have authority in them. In the authoritarian style, you become the center of gravity, or the center of this child's universe, the focal point. So you said something very powerful, that their want or desire to please, to follow authority, comes very rooted in following you and your desires and your commands from the get-go, from the moment they open their eyes. And they are never truly introduced to Allah as the authority. So we talked about this in our last podcast, right? That if you truly do justice to tarbiyah, your job is not to become that focal point in the child's life, but to help your child as a companion in the journey, to make Allah the focal point. Allah is your focal point, or should be. How do I get my child to make Allah the focal point? So I'm not, a'udhu billah, standing in the place where Allah should be in that child's life.
And that's a big conversation to have, because I think a lot of us don't talk about this. But a lot of adult children may not say it in this way, but they have a God complex for their parents. Now, I know
right.
a lot of it. I know this is a really hard thing to accept, but to think that your world revolves around what your parents want as adult children, and to feel like your world has shattered if your parents are not pleased with you, even though you're Islamically fulfilling. So again, you have to be fulfilling your Islamic duties as a child, because we have Islamic duties, and those are not absolved regardless of how your parents parented you. But if you're doing everything, and if you are doing it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if you've consulted a scholar and an imam, and you said, I'm doing this for my parents, am I doing the right thing? But your parents are not happy with you, and you're constantly worried, you're constantly anxious, your entire life revolves around that, then really, who is the focus point in your life?
Right. And I think that's it's a harsh reality to swallow. We think about these things on the conscious level, but subconsciously, somewhere we as parents, especially fathers, I would think, fall into this a lot as well. Is we, dare I say, enjoy sometimes that God complex, even though we dare not say God complex. But a lot of fathers out there subconsciously like that. You respond to every command. I drop it and you pick it up. I say jump, you say how high. And you go now from 16 to 26. You're still that same boy or girl that nothing has changed. So that I wanted to tease that out, because it's important for that parent. We talk about ideals on one side. We want to raise children that are independent thinkers. We want to raise an ummah that can fight evil with good, that is confident in its iman. Yet we're raising and producing men and women. We're raising and producing children that are, they're just looking for commands. They're not coming up with independent thinking. And a lot of times it's me and it's you and it's us that are the reason for that. That is the product of authoritarian.
I think also, to give a more realistic example as well, and to bring it back to someone who does have a 7-8-year-old child, if you have an authoritarian parenting style, and then your child turns 14, and all they've learned all their life until that point is that they are supposed to follow authority. They're just supposed to follow authority, or there will be repercussions. And the repercussions may be physical, like you might hit them, but a lot of times those repercussions are emotional. Especially nowadays in like the Western society, like your parent being upset at you is not them hitting you. It is silent treatment. It is them not talking to you, like, or not looking at you. It is them just, there's a different, you can tell. And it's really hard to put into words what it is, but the child knows it and everyone in the family knows it, that their relationship is not...
It's being made to feel like an outcast.
Yes.
Right? And
that is emotional, there's emotional trauma involved in that.
100%.